Hello and welcome to Quest for Fit episode 4. It feels like we were just recording the last one a second ago, Adam, but for our
Oh,
viewers,
I
it's
know.
been a week. We're trying to space these videos out weekly, and so I've got to remember to do an introduction each time. My name is Luke, and I'm sitting here today with Adam, and we are talking today about the topic of can you undereat? I'd like to start this one, Adam. You started the last one about overtraining, and the reason why I want to start is I've been ketogenic dieting for the last 3 months, and I felt I got to the point of diminishing return with that. I've got some specific ideas about dieting, and in particular with keto dieting, I felt that I wasn't getting the wide variety of fruit and vegetable minerals that would be in my diet, and I felt I was under eating a bit. And what broke the keto for me was I dreamt about food one night, and it's like, that's it. I'm not going to be dreaming about food. I'm just going to start and switch my dieting style. And I think I was under eating a little bit, and I wasn't getting the result. And for those that may be new to this, ketogenic dieting, how would you describe that, Adam?
Not eating carbs,
Yeah,
or less than 50 grams of carbs a day, I think is the technical way
yeah,
of looking at it. But
yeah, that's
yeah, and it's basically, in terms of scientific terms, it's where your body is using fat as its main fuel energy source,
yeah,
and breaking it down into ketones. And you can measure those ketones if you want to make sure you're in a ketosis state, in a ketotic state. But essentially, yeah, your body prefers glucose. Your brain particularly prefers glucose. And so when you deprive the body of the glucose, the body needs to convert fats or fatty acids into glucose, so the brain has a source of energy. And the idea with that is that while the body's doing that, it's going to also use your body stores of fat, so
yeah.
thereby causing you to lean up and lose the six pack, or the keg around the six pack, so to speak.
Yeah, and it's true, and it works. When I started this about 3 months ago, I was 104 or 105 kilos, and I'm now 93. But I found that as every week went on, it diminished in its value for me to keep doing it. So I've switched up to now going back to a clean vegetarian diet for the next month, and then I'll go back into keto dieting, I guess, which is probably not ideal across the end of year Christmas period, but it will keep me on the straight and narrow, I guess. In
Yeah, the
terms of
timing
undereating,
sucks.
I'm not a big proponent of calorie measurements per se, because in my world, a calorie from a gram of sugar is not the same as the calories from a gram of fat. And even though I know the measurements will be different, I don't think the value in those calories and the body burns them the same way. And we'll get into some more episodes about gut biome and gut bacteria, but I don't think calories behave simply. But do you think people who are training can undereat and underestimate how much food they need?
Yeah, of course. I mean, in my experience, over the years, and back 10, 15 years ago, when I was heavily into it, and probably the largest I've ever been,
Yeah,
I had different people come up to me and for advice on their training. And at Springwood, I remember a couple of guys trained really hard. They'd be screaming on the leg press
yeah.
loudly, so loudly that the people at the front counter used to warn them to shut up, otherwise they'd lose their membership.
It wasn't Dorian Yates'
So
gym, was it?
sorry.
It sounds like a Dorian Yates gym, but that gym on Dennis Road was a pretty hardcore gym, so
Well, I remember one of them anyway asked me, they're training hard, they're not getting the gains they should be. Why is that the case? And so I started talking to them, and I knew they trained hard. I'd see them training hard every day, but when they told me what they were eating, I just couldn't believe it.
yeah,
Um, they ate so little protein, it was ridiculous. And I gave them some advice on what they should do, and very quickly, within a short period of time, their gains went through the roof.
yeah,
And it was simply because of the protein. And I've had the same experience with a younger fellow, 15 years old, wanting to, bulk up, and in about 6 weeks, he followed what I told him to a T. His mum was very, very
surprised.
clear on telling me that he followed everything I said exactly.
Yeah,
And within about 6 weeks, he'd gained 9 kilos, and a
wow,
large proportion of that was muscle. So he obviously put a bit of fat on as well, but he was stoked.
Yeah.
So
So
look, it
that is
does
awesome.
work, and I think diet is if it's not at least, if it's not more than half, it's at least half of the battle
Yeah.
in terms of your gains. So I think it's very important that you eat not only enough, but you eat the right types of food and timing is the other thing. I can't emphasize the importance of when you eat,
Yeah.
and what you eat at that time is important. Yeah.
I think the one thing people need to do, from my perspective, that helps is be accountable for what you eat to yourself. So in some way, shape, or form, record it or measure it. I'm not into weighing my food, but I use an app where I can take a snapshot of what I eat and I can go back and look, why did this happen or why did I feel this way? And that's where I knew for the last couple of weeks I was probably under eating what I should have been eating. And since I've put carbs back in my diet, because I was eating 20 to 30 grams of carbs per day, down to the point where I wouldn't have sauce on food. So I used to love tomato sauce and barbecue sauce. 20 to 30 grams of carbs would go just in a few squirts of sauce, and people don't realize that. So on a true keto diet, all of that sort of stuff goes out, and the only carbs I was getting was from, I guess, carbs that were in the vegetables that I was eating. As a vegetarian, that was pretty much it, and it was just
Yeah.
incidental carbs, and they didn't add up to a lot. And I generally felt good doing it, and I'd do one cheat meal per week, structured and deliberate, where I'd get more carbs in that one cheat meal than I would for the rest of the week. But I felt
Mm.
sluggish after it, which is really interesting because now I'm back eating probably 120 grams of carbs a day or 150 grams of carbs per day. I don't feel sluggish, and within 3 or 4 days, my body's adapted back to eating carbs again. So I think the body adapts quickly, Adam, and that's why it's probably easier to undereat than people estimate. So, are you a believer in calories? Like, do you say to a person who weighs 80 kilos that you've got to eat X number of calories, or you don't think that's really appropriate?
Look, I think it's useful for a guide, but as I've said before, and as I'll always say, everyone's different. I
Yeah.
think one of the most valuable things I ever did was I did weigh everything. I did spreadsheet everything,
Wow.
and I did it for about 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And while it was tedious and annoying and time consuming, the amount of information I got out of that about my body and about what works for me
Hmm.
was astounding. And just the differences. So I took measurements, skin folds. I did everything at the same time as well.
Yeah.
And what would happen is if I didn't have a change that I wanted, I'd make small modifications to the diet,
Yeah.
and I'd see what happens. And
I
it
think
was
that's a
really
great takeaway,
useful.
Adam.
And I've done it once now. I
Yeah.
don't need to do it again. I know what works
Yeah.
for me as a person, and that's invaluable. So, and I think because everyone's different, I think if you do that for a while yourself, you don't have to do it forever. It will provide you with information about you and what's important for you. Like for example, I know that for me, um, 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight works for me.
Yeah.
I've gone all the way up to 400 grams a day,
Whoa.
and
That's a
I've
lot.
I've gone less than that, and I've found for me personally about 1 gram per pound works best for me.
Yeah.
So, but
That's,
I'd encourage everyone to try different things themselves to figure out what works best for them.
you know what? It might be a coincidence, but I'm about the same. I'm 93 kilos at the moment, and I would probably have 200 to 250 grams of protein a day.
Yeah,
Any
it's a
more than
good,
that, and
it's
it's
a
wasted.
exactly, and I found that myself. It's a good starting point.
Yeah.
Um,
But
some
eating
people
too
might
little
find,
protein, like being a vegetarian, you know what? I hear a lot of the vegetarian and particularly the vegan community, without picking on them, say that you can make gains on a lot smaller amount of proteins. And I'd come back to one of my points was it might be possible for their adapted body type to do that. But if you're a meat eater or a vegetarian who has a fair bit of protein, I don't think your body can adapt very fast to that low level of protein. I'm sure if I was in a situation where I didn't have access to protein, I might still be okay at maintaining mass, but I don't think I'd gain much mass or size without getting the sort of 1 pound or 1 gram per pound, which is what I think is reasonable.
yeah.
And are you then a believer in if it matches your macros, or do you think that's an excuse to eat Pop Tarts, which is a big argument a lot of people
Yeah,
seem to have online?
yeah, no, I'm not a huge believer of that. No, I'm more about for me. Uh, I'm just a believer in figuring out what works for you and then
Yeah,
and doing that. And it takes time, but I think once you have that information, it's invaluable. So
yeah.
yeah,
Well, look, one of my cousins is a very big advocate. She's a personal trainer, big advocate of if it matches your macros. And my point to her, and without being disrespectful, is I understand it works for you, but for a person who's perhaps at the start of the journey and isn't very educated about what they can and can't eat for their body, I kind of think it's a bit of a recipe for eating Pop-Tarts for breakfast, starving yourself till lunch, eating a small salad, and then for dinner having like a takeaway burger. You might get your macros in that lot, but I don't think the vitamins and the minerals will be there. So,
No, look, the best way to eat is small meals. Small meals throughout the day. I remember early on, family member was diagnosed with diabetes,
yeah.
and the regime for them was 6 to 8 meals a day,
Hmm.
and now that I've tried that, for a whole range of reasons, it's much better. It keeps your metabolism going, keeps a
Yeah.
steady supply of nutrients. It's much easier on the digestive system. It's a whole range of benefits. It's not practical,
Hmm.
but if you're in a position where you can eat small meals throughout the day while you work,
Yeah.
it works very well. So, yeah.
And I think there's a difference between eating small meals and grazing on food all day too. So, um,
Yeah,
I think they should be eaten as a distinct meal, and it is a lifestyle thing. That's where I think maybe the protein shakes becomes a bit more handy, or protein bars. We'll talk about that in an episode about favorite supplements too, because protein is one of my favorite supplements. Because though I don't necessarily consider it a supplement, which is interesting. Well, look,
yeah.
I think that's pretty much it for the can you under eat. I think my experience is yes, you can, and you really need to track and measure at least for some period of time. Both Adam and I have done that. I've done that now for the whole year, Adam. I've recorded everything since the 1st of January in an app, which is probably excessive, but I'm writing a dieting book and I'm
Yeah.
trying to track my weight versus my food. And I don't think there's any other way of doing it. I don't think you can guess these things and wonder how you managed to, in 1 month, make a really good um, goal, or really good headway towards your goal versus not. So I think you've given us some great information today, Adam, and we'll wrap it up there. And remember to subscribe to these videos, and we will see you next one.